Hello everybody and welcome to the second part of this video on narrative structure. Now I'm hoping that you've watched part one and you will have got to grips with some of the features that you can use with regard to manipulating time and making your structure much more interesting for your question 5 on paper 1. Now what I want to start with in this video is focusing on what the question is asking you to do. We don't know when it comes to the summer exam what the question is going to be. All we know is that they may provide you with a narrative question. You may get 2 descriptive questions, 2 narrative questions, or 1 of each to choose from, okay? So you have to be fully prepared to answer either a descriptive writing piece or a narrative writing piece. And you also need to understand that if it asks you to write the opening part of a story, about how you're going to do that, okay? Now, we spoke in part 1 about Gustav Freytags' triangle and how he discussed that dramatic works have 5 parts: an exposition, rising action, a climax, falling action, and a resolution. So obviously, depending on which part of the story you are asked to write, will depend on which part of that triangle you focus on. So if you are asked to write the opening part of a story, then you need to make sure that you really focus on your exposition. You really set the scene and that you are showing, not telling your reader what's going on, okay? So there's little action going to happen. Now you might decide that you focus on the exposition, the rising action, and then the end of your story is actually the climax. So you're almost leaving it on a cliffhanger ending, and I'll discuss cliffhanger endings in just a moment. So if it's the opening part of a story, then your exposition is what you really need to focus on. Now you might be asked to write a story about a difficult situation, for example, and they may say to you, focus your narrative on the resolution of the situation. Now we know that in that case we are going to have to start perhaps with the climax if we wanted to start in a linear narrative format, and then we're going to have to explain what the resolution of that difficult situation is, okay? So you're focusing on the second part of that triangle. Now, the question might not ask you to focus on a specific section of the story. You might literally just get asked to write a story about a picture or a story about a thing, a theme or topic. And in that case, it's up to you which part of the triangle you focus on, or if you decide you want to write a short story and move all the way through the triangle, okay? But you really need to make sure that you do cover exactly what you're being asked to do, and that's what I'm saying. Make sure you underline and highlight the really important parts of that question and focus your answer on what you are being asked to do. So I just want to go through with you some interesting narrative endings, because my students in particular really struggle to finish their work off in an interesting way. So let's have a look at these in a little bit more detail. So one way you can end your narrative piece of writing is to leave your reader with a question. Now we talk about rhetorical questions all the time when it comes to analysis of non-fiction sources. But you can actually use these in your writing as well, and you can use them in your fiction writing. So writers use this technique to engage their reader and to make their tale more memorable. So if you want to leave your reader with an unanswered question or something that you want them to really consider, then you can end your story with a question. Okay, another way you can end is with dialogue. So if you have an important conversation between 2 characters or a quote that you want to state, then you could end your piece of writing with that dialogue, and it could be a central message that you want to convey to your reader. So as long as it's a really important message, a theme, or something that you really want your reader to be left with, then you can leave them with that dialogue at the end. I mentioned briefly before about a cliffhanger ending. So a cliffhanger ending is where we have a particular action and it leaves the story with an unanswered question. And you often get this in soaps where they leave you with something particularly dramatic and you have to wait until the next day to find out what happens. So that's your cliffhanger, and really they're used to excite the reader and to build anticipation. So if you want to have that effect, then a cliffhanger ending is a really effective way of doing that. A circular ending is particularly interesting when it comes to structure. So your story could circle back to the beginning, what happened at the beginning of your story. So you may wish to finish with the same theme or idea as at the beginning, or if you've had a character introduce themselves with dialogue at the beginning, then you could finish with that very same dialogue at the end, okay? And often this is an important message or a theme that the writer wishes to communicate. So again, if you want to repeat that phrase, which is another linguistic feature, then you can do that by offering a circular ending for your readers. Okay, another way to end your narrative story is to have an image ending, so you can actually describe that final scene in great detail. So we've discussed showing, not telling, and this is where you create a specific mood or atmosphere. So it almost merges a little bit with writing to describe here. So you have your final paragraph where you really create a specific mood or atmosphere, and you show your reader perhaps what your character is seeing, hear, taste, touching and smelling. So you focus on the senses right at the very end. Okay, and the final ending that you could use is a lesson ending. So it's where the main character in the story might change or grow or develop, and perhaps over the course of the narrative they've actually learned something, and you want to communicate to your reader what it is that they've learned. Okay, so leaving with a lesson or a moral ending leaves with your reader with the thought of how your character has developed. Okay, so that's another way, another interesting way you can end your narrative. Okay, so that's the end of part 2 on narrative structure. I've been through Freytags triangle, we've talked about conflict, we've talked about how you can manipulate time within your writing and how you can use interesting narrative endings to make your writing more interesting. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you can get updates on when I add new videos for the paper 1 and paper 2 on the AQA GCSE English language exam. You can also follow me on Twitter at AQA Exams and head over to my website aqaexams.wordpress.com for loads of free downloads, including top level sample answers for the reading questions. Thanks for listening.